Interior, warehouse, night. Sneaking behind boxes and shipping containers, no doubt containing questionable contents, our hero spies him, the object of his heart's desire. Only his heart carries no cumbersome feelings of affection for this greasy creature of the night. No, our hero's heart burns. It burns with vicious hate. He lifts his gun into frame, his whole being stoic and unshifting. The time has come to kill. Wait, I'm killing this guy? Why the hell would I want to kill a person? Oh, I don't know. You're supposed to get revenge or something? No way, man. You're gonna need to give me more than that. It takes a lot to kill someone. I don't think I can do this. Oh, alright. I hear you, man. Well, let's see. What's a good way to get a character to do something drastic? Before we continue on this train of thought, I want to know from you guys, what do you think would be the best reason for our hero to be there at that warehouse about to kill those guys? What's the best setup for that generic plot that you can think of? I think most of us, when we think about revenge movies or a generic action plot, we may instantly turn to the idea of avenging a deceased loved one. So, problem solved, right? We give our action hero a wife, and then we take her away. Now he's nice and angry and ready to set out for revenge. But if you're anything like me, you're sick to death of this trope. Loved ones, especially women, getting used as catalysts for burly action heroes to finally drop their facade of complacency and get what they always truly wanted: violent revenge. A lot of men daydream about stepping up as a protector or letting loose and proving themselves to be the badass they always thought they were. But in movies, comic books, games, and possibly as a result of pop culture, the fantasies of some men, this often requires a call to action of loved ones being put in danger or dying. A generic revenge movie might go something like this. Hero and wife are so in love. They're under white sheets and smiling and everything. Oh no, the wife died. The hero is so upset, but not just upset, he's angry. Watch out, bad guys, he's coming for you. He's killed the bad guys. Now he can be sad upset instead of angry upset. That's all fine and good, but let's look at this same plot from a perspective the writers probably didn't intend, but is still kind of there. The most badass guy you've ever seen is hiding his dormant power so he can nerf himself into spending more time with the old ball and chain. Hell yeah, the wife died. He can finally actually do the thing he's good at and the thing we all want to see. Watch out, bad guys, he's coming for you. He's killed the bad guys. Now he can be sad upset instead of angry upset. The plot is still pretty much the same, but it exposes the flaw in these stories. We don't care about the loved ones, which sucks because wouldn't revenge be so much more satisfying if we actually gave a shit? If we actually wanted to see these bad guys dead because they are horrible people and not because it would just be so friggin' badass. So let's look at some examples that are kind of generic and don't entirely work, and then try to find what other examples did right. I wouldn't say these are 100% bad examples, just slightly weaker ones. In 1974, an era of hard-boiled characters doing hard-boiled things, Death Wish came out. This movie is exactly what I'm talking about. The protagonist's daughter is killed by muggers and his wife becomes catatonic, freeing up our protagonist to unleash his violent side. But what's interesting about this movie is that the protagonist, Paul Kersey, doesn't really have a violent side before he's pushed. He was a conscientious objector during the Korean War and had sworn off guns since the death of his father in a hunting accident. Paul's motivations aren't something we can't understand or empathize with, but they are rather shallow given the context. Bear in mind, Paul isn't just a guy, he's a peaceful guy. He had to let go of years of development and essentially allow his wife to deal with the trauma and death of her daughter on her own. Maybe we're supposed to see Paul as a somewhat out of touch and selfish guy. Maybe we aren't supposed to like him. But the film feels like a power fantasy. The issue doesn't feel complex, it feels heroic. This might ultimately come from the source material where Paul Benjamin, not Paul Kersey, flips his beliefs entirely after a break-in, and we are left to consider whether Paul's violent change was good and to be embraced by society, or bad and to be vilified. Just don't get me started on the 2018 adaptation. One positive thing I will say is that Paul's motivations might be generic by today's standards, but they are still close to real life. There are more than a handful of real cases of fathers killing the men who have attacked their wives or daughters. There might not be a more literal example of characters getting discarded to buff the protagonist than Upgrade. In the movie, the incident that kills our protagonist's wife is the same incident that opens our protagonist to, as the title says, an upgrade. I personally think this is a weaker example of character motivation because, again, we are introduced to a love interest, given no reason to care about her, and then she is promptly removed in order for our protagonist to do all the cool stuff. Don't get me wrong, I like this movie, and there is a lot to love about these motivations too. It's great that the movie takes time for us to see just how worse off the protagonist is for the incident. It doesn't feel like he has been immediately freed to wreak havoc. He's physically, mentally, and emotionally broken before going on the warpath. I also like that his agency is challenged and controlled by other factors, meaning revenge is something that was handed to him rather than something he sought out, which is really interesting. But it also means his path is unsteady and uncertain. There is a possibility that he doesn't achieve his goal. The other thing I really like about his motivations here is that there is a constant present reminder of loss. When other movies have a character experience loss so that they can get revenge, they're usually just fine. Their wife is gone, but who really cares? They still have all of their guns and everything else they need. In Upgrade, our protagonist is paralyzed, giving him and the audience a constant reminder that this loss has left an impact. When a wife or girlfriend character is killed off, we need more than flashbacks. We need a contrast that exemplifies that loss for the rest of the story. Outside of films, we have comics and manga too. There are thousands of examples to look at because with larger-than-life characters, we need larger-than-life character motivations. But often, by the nature of the medium, in superhero comics specifically, it's hard to find some truly convincing motivations. In comics, this exact trope has been distilled into one phrase: getting fridged. This term is so good at summing up this trope that it has bled into the language of literary criticism for mediums outside of comics as well. It comes from an incident in Green Lantern in which Kyle Rayner, my personal favorite Green Lantern, needed to experience some motivation and character growth. So his girlfriend at the time, who had only been around for 6 issues, had to die. They did this by having Major Force kill her and stuff her into a fridge, hence getting fridged. The reason the fridging trope makes motivation so frustratingly flimsy is because deaths of this kind are usually set up way too quickly, giving us no time to grow attached to the character or their relationship. And because it's always the girlfriend or the wife, it's more than misogynistic, it's cliché, boring, played out. It burdens a single character with all of the stakes. It's good to have our character care about and be invested in more than just one person. The good thing about superhero comics is that they can be continually shaped over time. Punisher has rarely generic, lame, uninspiring, and power fantasy-like motivations where he kills bad guys because bad guys killed his family. The real interesting aspects of Punisher, in my opinion, come from comics like Punisher Born and Jason Aaron's 2022 run where he joins the Hand. These imply that there was always something extremely dark in Frank Castle. While on the surface he's avenging his family, The truth may be that Frank Castle was always going to be a violent person. The death of his family just gave him an excuse to let go of society's expectations of him as a husband and a father, and a direction to aim his violent urges. The problem is that different writers treat the Punisher and his motivations differently. Some put his family at the center of everything, some completely neglect the part they play in his character, and some go as far as to give him another love interest, which completely dismantles his motivations. Even that same run by Jason Aaron tries to simultaneously imply that Frank is willing to essentially sell his soul to get his family back, while also not really caring about them that much. Because Batman's parents died so early in his life, we don't really get to see much of what his life was like before that loss. We can't understand Bruce's loss because we don't really know who they were, what they stood for, and what they were like as parents. We accept Batman's journey because a typical Batman story is about his battle with a new villain or a new challenge. Batman being vengeance is like decoration around his character. The death of his parents matters deeply to him and his lore, but it isn't something that requires a lot of focus from writers because it's only rarely a means to an end for the audience. But because this happened so early, he can't really benefit from the same restructuring of his mythology that the Punisher can, and we can't create additional meaning around that event. The Waynes often change between writers. Sometimes they're the most pure and perfect billionaires in the world, other times they're kinda shady. When emotional moments happen that tie into Batman's initial motivations, it doesn't retroactively add to his motivations. It's something that affects him once he's already Batman and past the motivational stage of his story.
The hands of death could not defeat me. The sisters of fate could not hold me. And you will not see the end of this day. I will have my revenge!
Games can't seem to escape this either. Kratos kills a whole pantheon to get his revenge, once again for the death of his wife and daughter. But there is the element of being controlled and used to kill his family that adds an extra sting. But even then, it doesn't amount to much more than his family dying. As cool as those PS2 games were, I'm sure we can all accept that Kratos wasn't an especially deep character. Before we get into the better examples, I just want to thank you guys for all of the love you showed on the last video. We're pushing for 1,000 subs, and we are so happy to see how many of you have joined us already. If you're enjoying the video and want to see what we do next, just remember to subscribe. Now let's look at the things that get motivations right, starting with something basic but deceptively deep. Star Wars. We all know it, we once loved it. It's one of the defining pillars of pop culture. The story flows so seamlessly that character motivation doesn't seem to be all that notable. But that's by design. For those who don't know, Star Wars A New Hope is one of the best examples of the hero's journey, as explained by Joseph Campbell, which is a well-established story template for adventure stories. But we're specifically looking at Luke's motivations, which are multifaceted. He already doesn't want to be on Tatooine when we first meet him. That's reason number one for him to go on an adventure, but I'm sure we can all agree that isn't enough. Then he gets a secret message from a space princess, giving him a direction. Then he meets up with Obi-Wan and gets given a lightsaber. Now he has the means to go on an adventure and a mentor to guide him. But something's missing. Luckily for Luke and the audience, his whole family was just killed by stormtroopers. I know this sounds like what I was criticizing, loved ones getting sacrificed to buff the hero, but it is different. The whole adventure isn't hinging entirely on Luke's aunt and uncle dying. They just happen to be the thing that makes it not just okay, but necessary for him to go on this adventure. Obviously, Star Wars isn't really a revenge movie. Luke doesn't set out with the obliteration of the Empire in mind, but he does end up avenging his aunt and uncle when he blows up the Death Star. So, what can we take from Star Wars as an example of good character motivation? It all boils up. It leads to one outcome. This is something that revenge plots desperately need. The act of revenge should feel like the only possible course of action. It needs to feel completely inevitable that our hero is on the path he's on. Luke has an internal desire, a means, a direction, and a push. Revenge plots are weakened by the expectation that the audience will accept revenge as the internal desire, the direction, and the push, all wrapped up in one. But there needs to be more than that. This leads us to our next example, John Wick. I love John Wick as a revenge movie because it gets so much right while also getting all of the setup out of the way early and dedicating the rest of the runtime to crazy action. Like other revenge movies, John Wick's wife dies, but unlike other revenge movies, she didn't die to give John a massive buff. She died from a terminal illness, something you can't exactly get revenge on, unless he wanted to become a doctor or something. After his wife dies, he is just trying his best. The only thing he has left of his wife is this little dog. This is where John Wick sets itself apart. The need for revenge is tied to a deeper emotional burden that existed before the push. Much like Luke Skywalker, before John Wick goes on his adventure, he needs to have internal desire. He's on the edge and all alone after his wife dies. The means. He was the assassin before retiring. A direction. He has all of his contacts and resources and knows who he needs to go after. And finally, the push, which is when they kill his dog, giving him no reason to care about maintaining a peaceful life anymore. We spoke about some comic characters in our weaker examples, so let's look at a strong example from that medium. Except, instead of a Western character, the example I want to look at is from a manga. Everybody's favorite black swordsman, Guts from Berserk, has one of the most compelling revenge stories in the comic and manga medium. This is largely helped by the fact that the journey of revenge is the overarching narrative that carries all of the other arcs. The hope of everyone reading is that Guts will someday kill Griffith. So why is his motivation compelling? If we look at his push, the eclipse, many people would agree that Guts' story of revenge is earned from that event. All of his friends died, and the love of his life, the only person he was ever able to open up to, had her mind shattered in such a needlessly cruel act that anyone in that position would hate Griffith forever. But there is an extra layer to his motivations provided by all that came before. Guts started life as something that would be seen as impossibly wretched, and for most of his upbringing, he wouldn't know real love or affection, causing him to rely on his own strength. But when the Band of the Hawk arrives, he is given affection, appreciation, and purpose, beyond being a single-minded killing machine. Under Griffith's leadership, he and his friends prospered. When Griffith was in trouble, they risked everything to help him, which made his betrayal all the more cruel. In one moment, the person who gave Guts all of the things he ever lacked took it all away again, pushing him forward on the path of revenge. Furthermore, we are constantly reminded of his loss, through his brand, his missing eye, and his missing hand. We threw some light critiques at Kratos earlier, but another game from the same era does have some slightly better motivations. When we meet Max Payne, his wife and child have been dead for a while. He isn't aggressively pursuing revenge. He's just trying his best to cope with the help of painkillers. It's only when his fellow cop and friend dies and he gets framed that he's forced to act. Max has internal desire, a means, a direction, and a push, which I think makes his motivations quite convincing. Only later in the story do we find out the people he's after were also responsible for the death of his wife and child, making things all the more personal. Much like Kratos, Max Payne isn't an exceptionally deep character, but his motivations offer more for his character.
Okay, so should I let my wife die or not? It's kinda time sensitive, man.
Well, I'm actually not sure yet. There are ways to make it work, but it's so generic. If we want our story to be about revenge, maybe we can spin it in a way that doesn't result in the death of your wife. So before we officially settle on anything, I want to look at some ways that we can shake it up. some alternatives to the typical people die, character gets revenge plots. As hard as it is to think of a good revenge plot, I think it's even more difficult to think of a revenge plot where the protagonist doesn't lose people, where they aren't alone. It's pretty clear why this is. People wouldn't do these things. They wouldn't go so far out of their own way. They wouldn't kill so many people if they still had something to lose. Good characters usually aren't the ones that are just like us. They're the ones that feel like complete, fleshed out individuals. If we were to try to make our character as relatable as possible, we might gain something in creating an emotional arc or connection with the audience, but we sacrifice creating something distinct. Say our guy works a normal job with normal hours, he has a normal house and a normal family. What counts as normal? It doesn't matter. That part is up to you. Then their significant other dies. A normal person with a normal job, a normal house, and until recent events, had a normal family, wouldn't go on a rampage to get revenge. How do I know this? Because most of us are normal people, and we lose people every day. While loss can drive us to do some out of the ordinary things, most of us aren't equipped mentally, physically, or practically for that kind of damage. Even in movies about the normal guy who goes out for justice and or revenge, there is a violent past, a military background, or some kind of justification for their ability to dish out violence. So what do we do when we want our characters to leave it all behind without sacrificing their loved ones? I know. Unfortunately, Taken raises a pretty good point. You weave them into the stakes. If a story is about getting loved ones back or protecting them, you can push a character pretty far without going down the well-worn route of killing the wife and child. But let's look at this idea with a better movie. Sorry, Taken. Prisoners is about a dad and a cop independently trying to find a pair of kidnapped girls. The thing that gives life to the motivations of Hugh Jackman's character, Keller Dover, is that early on we are given all of the evidence he would need to believe he has the right person. It helps that these motivations are tested and pressured by the narrative as the audience is given reasons to doubt Keller's conclusions. It's interesting because it isn't just revenge, there's the looming possibility of it being misplaced revenge. There are a few examples where drastic actions can be motivated by extortion. Drizzy has me watching Pretty Little Liars, so she can tell you all about the strengths and weaknesses of their motivations. Tell the nice people about Pretty Little Liars.
Hello. So in season 1, it's all pretty serious because the characters find out that their missing friend is actually dead. But not just dead. She's murdered. And they're getting harassed as well. Naturally, they're pretty upset and they want to know who's doing this. But we're talking about motivations for drastic actions. And a lot of the things that they do, like the secrets that they keep and the lengths they go to, are spurred on by A. A is the shadowy person that's extorting them. But the problem is, this motivation can only last so long. We're on season 4 now, and it's just insane to see them still keeping secrets and doing inexplicable things. It feels like there are very obvious solutions. Like they've stretched the motivation too thin, and we just can't buy into the things that they do anymore. Usually with dramatic irony, the audience has all the information and the characters don't. So when they're walking into a trap, we feel suspense. But when the characters have been dealing with this and they have just as much information as the audience, if not more, it takes out all the suspense and just makes it frustrating.
That was very interesting. Thank you. That was very informative.
Shut up.
Okay, so extortion could be an option for our hero. Let's cast the net a little wider. Maybe our hero isn't even the one trying to get revenge. Maybe, sort of like Pretty Little Liars in a weird way, the plot is moved along by the antagonist's search for revenge like we see in Old Boy. I never thought I'd compare Old Boy to Pretty Little Liars, but here we are. Our protagonist, Odesu, is manipulated and controlled while trying to get answers of his own. So maybe our hero is the victim of revenge rather than the one seeking it? Or maybe his motivations aren't about what happened to him as much as it is about who he is. In comics, Spider-Man has a beautiful origin story that has stood the test of time since the 60s. We all know the driving force behind Spider-Man can be summarized in one beautiful sentence: with great power comes great responsibility. The first act of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man perfectly establishes motivations for revenge, the outcome of which gives him a flawless base for his motivations as a superhero. Until Spider-Man 3, but let's not get into that. In the case of superheroes, sometimes their first issue is their origin and sometimes it isn't, but they usually don't wait too long to show how everything began. An interesting idea for a revenge story would be to change the progression of events. Instead of starting with their motivations, we can start with their actions and build suspense around their motivations. We see this in Akira Kurosawa's The Bad Sleep Well. There are a few notable things about the motivations of our main character. First of all, for the first 20 minutes, we don't even know who our protagonist is. When we do find out who we're following, it's unclear why he's going as far as to marry into the family he's trying to destroy. Eventually, we find out that, like many other examples, he's avenging his father. If you're going to have a basic motivation like avenging a loved one, at least add some suspense or mystery around the motivation. If the point is to get to the outcome of the tragedy, why not just skip ahead and reveal the mystery of their motivations gradually? But, like the best examples we've looked at, it's not enough that they killed his father. He can't stand by knowing what he knows. His sense of justice won't allow it. The stakes are tied to people who still live, primarily his surprisingly tender relationship with his wife, whom he initially used as part of his plan but grew to love. Later, we also find out that the sudden affection for his father that wasn't there for him is from regret. He regrets their relationship. He regrets their final interaction, and reflecting on their past, he can see that his father loved him. He doesn't just want revenge for himself, but he feels he owes it to his father. There is also a close connection between his motivation and his actions. His revenge has further ramifications. He is destroying the system from the inside. In a lesser film, or if it got an American remake, we would have started with the death of his father, seen his reaction, and followed him without much tension or pushback on his motivations until maybe the third act, where the drama around him and his wife would no doubt be overblown. But in these examples, like Spider-Man and The Bad Sleep Well, there's still the element of loss that acts as their push. Motivations for revenge can come from business gone awry, relationships getting disrupted, or a personal pain that hurts so much that punishment must be dealt. An entire genre has surfaced as a result of a crime that many women experience but often goes overlooked by law enforcement. Sorry guys, I'm about to bust out the feminist literature. In the book, Screening the Male, there is a chapter dedicated to the phenomenon of rape revenge films, where the writer, Peter Lehman, suggests that male audiences only accept the act of revenge as justifiable because the perpetrators are depicted as repulsive, sleazy people. Maybe that was true in 1993, but I'd like to think it's different now. That we can accept that, as is often the case in these movies, getting assaulted and then left for dead is a fair reason to want revenge, no matter how the villains are portrayed, because that is just a sleazy act on its own. I'm only making this point because it does have an interesting connection to the trope of killing women. Even when the protagonist is a woman and revenge is up to her, she is still the subject of pain and suffering. Where other revenge stories have the wife die, in female-oriented revenge films, it isn't typical for the husband to die. Instead, all of the pain is still dumped on the female character. I'm not really trying to say anything profound, it's just weird, right? So before we settle on a direction for our hero, what are the key things we should be watching out for if we want better motivations for our characters? We don't need to see barely established characters, especially women, get sacrificed to make our heroes cooler, more tragic, and more badass. We don't want our hero's only challenges to be physical. He should have an arc. His path of revenge should face an internal challenge that pushes back against his initial motivation. He shouldn't just be fighting drug dealers, for example, because they killed his family. He should be fighting his own drug gang, or he should be framed as the dealer, something that ties him closer to the issue. He should seem to have no other choice but to seek revenge. Something inside, outside, or preferably both, should be compelling him beyond, "My wife died." If the character's wife dies, he shouldn't get another love interest over the course of the movie, because that just completely undercuts his motivations. Alright, buddy. Are you ready to find out what your motivations are?
Nah, it's too late. You took too long. I'm just gonna kill these guys because they killed my friggin' wife. And then he killed those guys. And it was so badass.
I hope you enjoyed our video on motivations. If you did, let us know by leaving a like. What do you think is the best revenge story? For me personally, I might sound like a hypocrite saying this, but I think mine is The Revenant.
You came all this way just for your revenge, huh?
His motivations aren't anything insane, they're quite generic, even though it's based on a true story. But I think the movie is exceptional.
Mine is Spider-Man.
Yours is Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That's a good choice. Even though only the first third is a revenge story. That's a good choice. I'm gonna keep that. I also want to know what other examples you guys have in any medium of really good or really bad revenge stories or character motivations in general. Once again, if you want to know what we do next, the best way is by subscribing. Thanks for being here. See you next time.